My wedding date was set months in advance. I had everything planned perfectly, from the flowers to the venue. But then, out of nowhere, my golden child's sister suddenly announced her lavish engagement party for that exact same day. I begged my parents to intervene, but they made their choice clear. The entire family skipped my wedding. They left me standing at the altar with empty rows where my flesh and blood should have been. I thought my heart was entirely broken, but I kept my chin up and went through with the ceremony anyway. During the reception, as they celebrated miles away, my dad sent a panic text. "What did you just do?" I looked at the legal papers in front of me, took a deep breath, and sent back one message. Seconds later, his terrifying realization hit my inbox with a reply that read, "Wait, are you serious?" My name is Audrey, and I am 27 years old. Growing up, I quickly learned what it felt like to live in the shadow of a golden child. My younger sister, Vanessa, was the center of my parents' universe. Every milestone of mine was treated like an afterthought, while her smallest accomplishments merited a parade. Despite this, I built my own life, found a wonderful man, and happily set our wedding date a full year in advance. I had everything perfectly planned, from the flowers to the venue. But then, out of nowhere, Vanessa suddenly announced her lavish engagement party for that exact same day. She didn't just pick the same weekend, she picked the exact same hours, demanding that the family choose between us. I begged my parents to intervene, to tell her to change it, but they made their choice painfully clear. Before I tell you how my parents reacted, make sure to follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. Their response shattered whatever hope I had left. They told me that because I was the independent, strong daughter, I wouldn't mind if they celebrated Vanessa's special day instead. They expected me to smile while they willfully tore my wedding day apart. I sat in my room staring at the calendar, realizing that the people who were supposed to protect me were actively planning my public humiliation. But they had no idea what they were truly giving up. The days leading up to the ceremony were a blur of tears and quiet determination. When I tried one last time to call my mother, hoping she would change her mind, she sighed with that familiar, heavy irritation. "Audrey, don't be selfish," she said, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. "Vanessa has planned a beautiful celebration at the country club, and it wouldn't look right if her own parents weren't there. You're getting married anyway, so why make a scene?" That was the final blow. They weren't just skipping my wedding. They were actively dismissing it as a minor inconvenience compared to Vanessa's party. When the big day arrived, I stood behind the heavy oak doors of the church, my hands trembling against my lace gown. As the music began to play and the doors swung open, a cold wave of reality hit me. The left side of the church, the side reserved for my flesh and blood, was completely vacant. Rows of polished wooden pews sat empty, a devastating, public testament to my family's betrayal. The guests on my fiancé's side looked on with a mixture of pity and shock, whispering quietly among themselves. I felt a sob rising in my throat, but then I looked down the aisle. My fiancé was standing there, his eyes filled with absolute love, devotion, and a fierce protectiveness that instantly anchored me. Beside him, his parents gave me a reassuring, warm nod that promised me I was no longer alone. I swallowed my grief, held my chin high, and walked down that aisle. They thought their absence would destroy my day, but it only proved who my real family was. To understand the full weight of what happened next, you need to know a hidden truth about my family's financial dynamics. My late grandmother was a brilliant, fiercely independent businesswoman who saw right through my parents' reckless spending habits and their blatant favoritism toward Vanessa. Before she passed away, she established a massive trust fund and a portfolio of lucrative commercial estate properties. However, because she wanted to ensure that the family legacy wasn't squandered on Vanessa's endless whims, she placed incredibly strict stipulations on the release of those assets. According to the legal terms of her will, the entire estate was set to transition management during the next major family milestone, which happened to be my wedding. My grandmother's decree explicitly stated that the executive transfer of power required the physical presence and co-signatures of the immediate family members during the milestone event to ratify their shared corporate governance. If any members voluntarily boycotted or failed to attend the designated family milestone without a valid medical emergency, their legal rights to the corporate assets and the primary estate would be permanently forfeited. My parents and Vanessa were so completely blinded by their desire to pamper my sister and humiliate me that they didn't even bother to read the fine print of the legal notices my attorney had sent them weeks prior. They thought skipping my wedding was just a petty emotional snub to show me my place. Instead, by choosing the country club over the church, they walked directly into a massive legal trap that my grandmother had masterfully set from beyond the grave. The emotional weight of the ceremony quickly shifted into a strange sense of empowerment as we moved to the reception. While our guests laughed and celebrated, my estate lawyer, who had been quietly sitting in the back of the church, approached our head table with a sleek leather folder. He didn't say a word, just offered a respectful nod and presented me with the final, irrevocable trust paperwork. Because my parents and Vanessa had voluntarily boycotted the legal marriage ceremony to drink champagne miles away, the trap had officially sprung. By failing to show up and co-sign the mandatory transition documents, their executive power over the entire family empire evaporated on the spot. The ownership of the family business assets, the commercial properties, and the primary estate automatically defaulted entirely to me. I calmly picked up a pen and signed my new married name on the dotted line, officially taking absolute control of everything. Less than 20 minutes later, the real chaos began. Over at Vanessa's extravagant engagement party, my dad tried to use the corporate card to pay the massive catering bill, only to have it aggressively declined. When he frantically checked his banking app, he discovered that every single corporate account had been completely frozen by the bank's automated compliance system. The sudden, terrifying realization that their entire financial lifeline had been cut off hit him like a physical blow. My phone buzzed aggressively on the table next to my wedding cake. I looked down to see a panicked text from my father. It read, "What did you just do?" I stared at the screen, a calm wave of satisfaction washing over the lingering heartbreak. I didn't type a long, emotional paragraph or scream at him for ruining my day. Instead, I calmly pulled up my camera, took a crystal-clear photo of my newly signed marriage certificate, and paired it with a digital copy of our grandmother's strict forfeiture clause. I pressed send, letting the cold, hard legal facts speak for themselves. The text bubble on my screen danced for what felt like an eternity as my father processed the reality that his wealth was gone. Seconds later, his frantic reply arrived, the text practically shaking with desperation. "Wait, are you serious?" I didn't hesitate. I typed back, reminding him that they had been warned weeks ago about the mandatory milestone signing. I explained that by choosing to prioritize Vanessa's vanity over my wedding, they had legally stripped themselves of all executive power over the family fortune. They wanted to treat my life like an afterthought, but their pettiness had just cost them absolutely everything. There was no going back, no loopholes, and no compromising. For the first time in 27 years, the playing field was completely leveled. The fallout from that single text message was immediate and devastating. Within minutes, the illusion of Vanessa's perfect, lavish lifestyle completely crashed down around her. As the new executive trustee, my very first official act was to cut off the hefty monthly allowance that had been funding her reckless spending habits, her designer wardrobe, and her high society party lifestyle. She and my parents were suddenly left stranded with a massive country club bill they couldn't pay, forcing them to face immediate public embarrassment in front of all their wealthy friends. Fueled by pure rage and financial panic, my parents and Vanessa left their own party and drove straight to my wedding venue. They tried to storm into my reception, screaming that I was a thief and demanding that I tear up the legal documents. But I had already anticipated their desperation. Before they could even cross the threshold of the dining hall, our hired venue security stepped in, blocked their path, and quietly but firmly turned them away in front of the remaining onlookers. As I watched them being escorted out through the glass doors, a profound sense of clarity washed over me. This was the final, undeniable proof of their true nature. They had never cared about me as a daughter or a sister. They only cared about my existence when their own luxury and financial stability depended entirely on my compliance. Standing hand in hand with my husband, I stood my ground, absolutely refusing to back down. They had made their choice to abandon me, and now they had to live with it. 3 months later, the dust had finally settled, and the reality of their new lives had fully set in. I used a portion of the inheritance to secure a beautiful, stable future for my husband and myself, entirely free from the shadow of my family's toxic manipulation. My parents and Vanessa were forced to sell their expensive assets just to manage the massive debts they had quietly accumulated over the years. They tried sending desperate, apologetic messages, but I knew their sudden remorse was entirely about the frozen bank accounts, not genuine love. What would you do if you were in my place? Would you forgive them after everything, or would you keep the estate and walk away cleanly? Comment below and let me know your thoughts. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories from the channel that are absolute favorites, and they will definitely surprise you with their twists. Thank you so much for watching until the very end.